You're listening to the Recording Acappella podcast, and today's guest is Voices Only executive producer Corey Slutsky.
I find that too many groups that self-track either aren't taking the time to learn the skills or aren't putting in the time and energy to get good tracking.
Welcome to the Recording Acappella podcast. Corey Slutsky and I started an acapella at the exact same time. Before starting the amazing Voices Only compilation albums back in 2005, Corey was a member of the ICCA champion and finalist groups, the USC Socal Vocals and the University of Michigan G-Men. He is executive producer of Voices Only and Voices Only Forte, and producer for Voices Only Productions. But before becoming a full-time acapella producer, Corey had a career in TV marketing and sports journalism. He shares what it's like to switch careers, how to do it, and we also spend a lot of time talking about what it takes to get a song on Voices Only. I can't wait for you to hear this interview because Corey is brutally honest about some of the not-so-sexy sides of making a career in acapella work. I'm Danny Osmond, and this is the Recording Acappella podcast. Corey, welcome to the show. How's it going, man?
Good. How you doing, Danny? Thanks for having me.
Good. It's been a while since I've seen you.
Yeah.
When was the last time I saw you? I can't even remember. It was last year. Probably, yeah. So you've been doing some traveling recently to record some groups. I saw you were out in Oakland with Vocal Rush and Arizona. How have you enjoyed the traveling?
I really enjoyed the traveling. I like to, both domestically and internationally, I like seeing areas I haven't been to before. And so recently, I'd never been to Oakland. I'd never been to Tempe. So it's nice to go there and meet new people and enjoy the food of the area and stuff like that.
It's got to be about the food.
It's always about the food and the beer. I always like to try the local beer. But as you know, it's exhausting. It's really tiring. For these two specifically, it was cross country. So you're talking about a full day of travel, and then you're recording for 10 to 12 hours a day consecutively for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days in a row. And at the end, it's just like you need a decompression. And older guys like us that have kids, you don't get that day of decompression when you get home.
I was going to say, we're about the same age. I've gotten to the point where if we go through a 12-hour day, I'm like, sorry, I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Because my body just doesn't recover like you guys. You know, they'll do a 12-hour day and then they'll go out and party and then they'll be back at 9 a.m. It's rough.
The other thing is sitting in a session for 10 to 12 hours. They come in for a couple hours at a time, but at least for me, I'm good for about 8 hours, and then my brain just shuts off. And so I can do 10 hours, I feel like, but I might not be as nitpicky during the tracking, where earlier in the day, I'll make them re-record it and redo it until it's what I want. But at the end of the day, I'm just like, just track it. It'll be fine.
Just get it. Yeah. I find the key is finding some way to stand up at some point. I actually, so at Stanford, the place we record is actually this room. You went to USC. Yeah, you didn't go to Stanford.
Yeah.
It's in a dining hall, which is kind of odd, but it's this room. I think it used to be a storage room or a conference room or something like that. But one of the group's alumni laid down some money and paid for like one of those whisper room vocal booth type things and some other equipment and stuff. And so we go in there. Because it's a dining hall, there's lots of tables, and we found a couple of like high top tables. So we move those in, and I can sit on either a bar stool type thing, or I can move and then I can stand up. And that makes those days go a lot better, because just the ability to get up and down and move your body around. The things you didn't know about recording, right? It's physically taxing on your body, because sitting's the new smoking, right? It slowly kills you to not be active.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's all I do anymore is sit.
Right. But so that's interesting, because you were involved in sports marketing and journalism before this. You didn't start out as a recording engineer. But before we talk about your other career, most people know Corey Slutsky as the executive producer of the Voices Only compilation albums. Voices Only has been around for about 13 years now.
Wow.
How has that original idea that you started back in 2004 evolved over the years?
Well, the original idea hasn't changed a whole lot. I've expanded upon it, which has been really cool. So for those that don't know, Voices Only is a 2-volume best of, I put in quotations, scholastic compilation album, which means college and high school. It started out as just college back then. And then around 2011, so that would have been after 6 years of the collegiate, launched a companion series, which was Voices Only Forte, which was for non-scholastic. So your professional groups, your post-collegiate amateur groups, collegiate best of groups like Hyannis Sound, which is not affiliated with any school, but it's a summer group. For those that don't know, it's kind of like an audition male collegiate. You could probably describe it better.
No, that's how I would describe it.
So
collegiate supergroup.
It's collegiate supergroup, yeah, but not affiliated. So that would be a Forte type group. So did that, have been doing that for 6 years. And then about 2014, I think, was the first time we did it. We opened up the original Voices Only to high school or middle school, if any ever pop up recording, which would be awesome. So it became a scholastic compilation, which is kind of upped the bar, because the high school groups that do great recording are amongst the best scholastic recording groups.
Agreed. Yeah, they are kicking ass right now.
Yeah. So from an evolution standpoint, that's really been the only evolution. I mean, from the very beginning, just refining the sound that I'm looking for and my team is looking for. It's interesting to see. It's more about the evolution of the groups, really, to see how the recording has changed. I go back and listen to the first album, and a few of those songs still stand up.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, you hear the sonic difference. It's night and day to what you hear today.
Well, the same thing has happened to me with the other compilation. We don't have to mention the original compilation.
You can mention, it's okay.
Yeah, so Boca, right?
That's what it's modeled after.
I have memories of some of those songs being just mind-blowing, and like that, some of those compilation albums were what sent me into joining an Acappella group in the late 90s, and then eventually wanting to do this as a career. And I have these memories, and then I'll go back and listen to some of those early Boca albums and be like, oh, yeah, the energy's good and the songs are good, but our recording techniques have gotten much better.
I recently had a conversation with our friend James Cannon, and we were having a debate about the best Boca, which is a stupid a cappella producer debate. And so we started just riffing off the songs that we loved throughout the early 2000s, and then I found some of them on my computer and on random websites that like have these archived songs that you can't find anywhere else. And I remember saying to him, like, this was the best Boca track I've ever heard, and it's so great. And I went back and listened to it, and I was like, it's okay.
Yeah.
I remember it being a lot more mind-blowing in 2001, but it's still enjoyable. I'm not going to listen to it again for another 10 years, but it's a nice nostalgia trip.
I have always loved your compilations, and one of the reasons I love them is the diversity that you've always had. And it seems like that's one of the things you strive for. Can you take us through the selection process for the songs? And if you have any recommendations for groups that are wanting to get a song on your albums, please feel free to share those.
I'd like to say there's some amazing, mind-blowing technique that we use to try and pick our songs, but it's really just what we like. It helps to start with something that's well-produced, which I'm sure we'll talk about more in a little while. I get questions all the time. Every year, at least one or two directors or high school teachers or somebody emails me and says, we want to submit, does it need to be professionally produced, or can we record ourselves? And without giving anyone an advantage or anything else, I say, it certainly helps. It gives you a leg up if you're professionally produced or produced, as opposed to just, recording yourself on whatever interface you have. It gives you a leg up. It doesn't mean that a live take is not going to be amazing. It wouldn't make it onto our album. But so the selection process, let's get back to your question.
Sure.
The selection process. So we get all of the submissions, and then I have a team of producers that vet all of the submissions. And they make their lists of the songs that they think are like the top 3-tier songs, the songs that should be considered. And then we curate that list, myself and my senior producer, Dave Bernstein, who runs the Acappella blog. Mm-hmm. He's my senior producer. Individually, we both go over everything, and then we have some conversations, and then we get together on a Skype call, and we talk through everything and decide what's going to make the final list. Usually we're in pretty good agreement. There's a couple songs here and there that we may have a conversation about, but we try to find some kind of diversity. We like to have something of everything. With a 2-volume album, if you have 38 tracks that are all the same, that's pretty monotonous and not enjoyable. So we passively try to find original music or interesting jazz music or something in a foreign language. It certainly helps in my mind, because this is my business, to have popular music, because that's what sells. But yeah, there's nothing fancy to the selection process. It's probably what you think. It's, we're listening, we're using our seasoned ears to find things, and we're really getting down to the nitty-gritty. So you can't sneak something by us as far as something that's underproduced. We can tell when something is underproduced, or, not to negatively stereotype, but self-tracked. You can tell when something's self-tracked not well.
You can tell if it's been self-tracked and then given to a mixing engineer to try to save it.
Yeah, exactly. To try to save it. That's a good way to put it.
So let's use a sports analogy, the idea of the quarterback and intangibles. Are there certain intangibles that songs have that you find give it a leg up when being considered for a compilation like Voices Only?
It certainly helps to be interesting, something different than we hear all the time, or that you hear all the time, which is really hard in pop music, right? It's really monotonous. So, for instance, on the most recent Voices Only, we had a really cool slow down version of I'm Gonna Be 500 Miles by the Proclaimers. That was No Comment from University of Illinois. And nobody expected that. And that's a track that people mention to me all the time, that not my producers, but other people. So something like that's really cool, when you can take something and flip it on its head, but will be recognizable.
Performance quality, performance energy, right? Heart, things that, you might have a song that's technically perfect, but has no feels. Is that important to you guys when you're selecting?
Sometimes. I can tell you it's really important to me as a producer when I'm in the studio. You have to have the right energy. For sure. That's probably the number one thing. That's probably more important to me than the feels. Maybe just because it's so rare in a scholastic a cappella that you find a track that has that. So I guess when you do have it, I'm like stepping on my own words. When you do have it, it really does stand out. So to answer your question, energy and emotion, the feel, those are two really important factors when you're not talking about a generic pop song.
So let's go back to something you said about you can tell when groups have self-tracked themselves. And I don't want you to blow up my whole idea of my blog here. So I spend a lot of time in my blog trying to help groups learn how to record themselves, but better, right? To
right.
Make it sound like a professional had tracked it by relating some of the things that, like you were saying, you do when you're tracking a group and I do when I'm tracking a group to get that better performance out of them. But I tend to tell groups that that's the only thing they should try to do themselves. You can pretty easily learn how to press record and stop, and you can easily learn some of the techniques. You can't get the experience, but that's what I'm trying to relate with the blog. I do tend to say, though, that when you get to the post-production, the editing, the mixing, the mastering, that you should hire a professional, mainly for that experience. And I wanted to hear from you. Do you agree with that? And why do you think it's important to have a professional involved?
Yes, I do. Mainly because, not talking about the selfish part of getting the business, but mainly because the professionals.
Oh, you can talk about that. I mean, talk about that.
Come hire Danny or I, or any of the other people you're going to hear on these podcasts. We, they, us, whomever have years and years and albums of experience. And I'm sure everyone else is going to say the same thing. They've done it. They've been through everything that you're trying to learn already. And so they can do it a lot quicker, and they know what they need to do, and they know what you're going to want most of the time without you knowing that's what you want. And they know the tips and tricks. And so using that is going to get you what you want a lot quicker and a lot easier and a lot cheaper. Well, not cheaper, because doing it yourself is cheaper.
I mean, if you think about time, I can...
When you think about time, yeah.
Right. I can give you 2 examples in the last year where a group has come to me. They've been editing and mixing their own album, and they want some feedback. And it's taken them 2.5 years to get to that point because they've been doing it when they could, and they've been mixing and making mistakes or accidentally deleting files and having to re-record and stuff like that. And I mean, I take a simple example like that, simple mistakes that a professional just rarely makes, because I already made those mistakes 10 years ago and learned my lesson, and so have things in place to never make that mistake again.
As something that you can do is, if you track yourself, and I then recommend hiring a professional, but also you have the same file, so you could play with it yourself at the same time, compare and contrast what they've done and what you've done, and then learn from that.
Tom Anderson and some other arrangers are going to be on this show at some point. I use an example with arranging regularly that someone, maybe you can't afford to have your whole album arranged by Ben Bram, but you might be able to get one song from Ben Bram and learn from the example. And that's something you can do with professional production too, is you can learn from the example. Right. Why does my mix not sound like Bill Hare's mix? And compare and contrast. That's a technique that mixing engineers use a lot, is a reference track. Essentially bringing in a track of a song that they like and trying to match their mix to it. Compare and contrast. What does the low end sound like? What does the snare drum sound like? And trying to get the same sound, and that's how they learn.
The self-tracking thing, I don't know how much we're going to get into that. I agree and disagree on the self-tracking.
Go ahead. So what do you disagree about the self-tracking?
I think if you can afford it, I'd recommend using a producer to record with, because the same reasons for editing, mixing, and mastering is they have the experience. I think the problem with self-tracking, at least in my experience as a producer and a Voices Only executive producer in hearing so many things, is that I find that too many groups that self-track either aren't taking the time to learn the skills or aren't putting in the time and energy to get good tracking.
Those are 2 points that I make all the time.
Yeah, so groups are like, great, we'll spend this amount of money to have everything post-produced, but we'll just track it ourselves, and it doesn't matter how good it is because they're going to make it sound amazing. Well, no, that's not how it works. The final product is only as good as what you put. You can't
polish a turd.
That's the analogy I was going to use. It's still a turd at the end of the day. It just looks prettier.
I have an example with a group that has routinely been tracking themselves for a long time. And I was brought into the equation when the person that was mixing their stuff was saying, you guys really need help. I came in and tracked one song for them, and immediately it was clear to them the 1,000 things that they did not know. And usually, like we've been saying, it comes down to experience, right? You said it, where we get into a situation and we've heard 50 songs just like this song and 50 arrangements just like this arrangement. And so when we get to a certain point, we know like that, boom, okay, let's track these 2 bars this way. Let's use this tracking technique. Let's break it down this way, or try it this way, or picture this in your head when you sing it. Because we've been through that situation 100 times, we can immediately move there. Whereas it might take a group doing it themselves 10 times, 10 songs to get there. This one group in particular had re-recorded the same song 4 times because they weren't happy with the energy. I came in there immediately and got the energy because I knew exactly what needed to be done for the hook or for whatever. Those are very valid points. I'm glad you brought those up.
You said something there that's a big frustration for me, in that I preach to groups all the time. So I understand. I feel like a lot of the times, especially when college and high school groups or maybe post-collegiate groups that aren't professional groups self-track, it's a money issue, which is completely 100% valid. I tell them all the time, especially if they've sent me one track already and then I start working on it and then I provide feedback. I say, why don't you have me come record one song for you and you sit with me and we talk about it and you ask questions and you see what I do to get these takes. And then the rest you can do yourself. And I have yet to have a group take me up on that. And it's so frustrating because then I get the rest of their songs and they sound the same as the first one, even though I've given them all this feedback. And it's like the amount of money that you're going to spend for me to do the extra editing on that is equivalent to or more than the amount of money it would have cost to have me come record one song. And then the final product would have been, in my opinion, better.
Well, keep telling groups that because I'm at the point now where I do that maybe 2 or 3 times a year with different groups. Mm-hmm. So I think, and Deke, who was on the show last, we were talking about how things are, more and more groups each year get started. There's going to be too many groups for the number of specialists in Acappella.
There already are.
Yeah, there already are. And there have been for 9-10 years and before that. So keep mentioning it because there are groups that will take you up on that very valuable time. You and I both have backgrounds in music, pretty serious backgrounds in music, but we didn't start out as a cappella professionals. You left your first career and are now a full-time a cappella producer. What led you to that decision, and what thoughts do you have for other people who are considering pursuing a career in music, or more specifically a cappella?
People are always surprised when they find out this isn't what I have always done and it's not what I have my degree in. I've never studied music production at any level of learning or higher learning. It's all self-taught, which I think a lot of a cappella producers are. There's probably only a handful that actually studied it in college. For me, I'll start with what led to my transition was I was working in television full-time as an executive, doing scheduling, but was involved in the a cappella game, right? I was already doing voices only, the compilation. I was heavily involved in the community, talking to groups, judging CARAs and ICCA and all that jazz, and decided I wanted to self-produce my own EP. And so bought some equipment, taught myself, and then learned from people like you and Bill and Alex Green and Dio, because this community is so welcoming and friendly and we all help each other, and started recording other groups, started recording college groups at USC and UCLA. And so to make the long story short, soured on my industry that I was in, found that more people were interested in hiring me for the a cappella stuff. And that combined with having a child, wanting to move back to where my family was, my wife getting a job there, decided to take the plunge and cut my revenue stream in half and do a cappella producing full time, which despite cutting the revenue stream has been the best decision that we've made personally as a family. And then the other question was advice for others. Learn a lot, watch YouTube videos, talk to people. If you can, do it supplementally.
Yeah.
Right? Get something that is going to satisfy your financial needs elsewhere and do it as a hobby and get better and learn. And then if you feel comfortable enough and you feel like your stuff is good enough and people are showing interest in you, then you take the plunge. If you can find an apprenticeship, that's the biggest regret that I have, is not taking advantage of that when I did. I had a couple opportunities to go to Soup to Nuts with Bill and didn't, and regret that to this day.
An intensive program like that is good to get off on the right foot. I'm glad you said don't jump in head first if you can afford it, because it does. It's like any other consulting or independent contracting or whatever. You've got to build up your network. You've got to meet people. You got to make a lot of friends. You got to have people that will endorse you and believe in you before you can really go out there and find all the quality clients or whatever.
I mean, for me, I started producing for other groups in 2012. So it's been 5 years now. And I feel like just now, like March, April, right now, I feel comfortable that I have enough work to sustain myself right now. That's the other thing, is be ready for the highs and lows. 3 months ago, I was like, oh crap, I have nothing on the books. What am I doing with myself? And now I'm so overwhelmed with work that I don't know what to do with myself. I know in 3 months, when it hits the dead of summer, again, there's going to be no work.
Yeah, that's the balance thing of you've always got to be finding something to put in the pipeline. And the thing that people don't tell you when you start your own business, you're not just having to do the work for your business, you're also having to do the marketing and the emailing and all of that type of stuff. And so you got to find a way to balance your time and keep everything moving.
I spend so much time on customer relations. I'm constantly going, why haven't I finished this edit yet? Oh, wait, I spent 3 hours this morning dealing with emails for customers and working on finding Airbnbs. And
yeah, I get up at 5 a.m. every morning so that I can have a good hour and a half before my kids get up.
Right. I wish I could do that, but...
Yeah. Well, I go to bed at 10 and get up at 5, and it seems to work. So now that you have a lot of tracking under your belt, do you have any funny stories, or what's the funniest thing that's ever happened in the studio or while you've been recording?
The funniest things. Oh man, I have a terrible memory.
That's fine. I do too. And
the only thing I can think of is I just had a group in the studio yesterday, and I had 2 guys in here tracking at the same time. And it just happened that these 2 guys were constantly messing up in that they would take turns messing up, not intentionally. It was one would mess up and then they'd track again and the next guy would mess up. And they thought it was the funniest thing. They kept cracking up and we had to keep stopping to the point that I have, you're old enough to remember this, but I have a koosh ball in my studio. And it's a soft, squishy ball. And I said to them, I'm going to start throwing this at you every time you mess up. And I did. I just started chucking it at them, and they thought it was hilarious. And I thought it was funny at first, the screwing up. I was laughing along with them, but it got to a point where it was like we'd stop for a minute every time they'd mess up because they were laughing so hard. And it was finally like, all right, come on. I mean, I'm happy to laugh here on the clock, and get paid for it.
Right, exactly.
But this is your money.
So that's the key to a good recording is threatening the singers.
Threatening the singers with bodily injury.
Yeah.
Yeah, throwing things at them.
Where do you see Acappella in 5 years?
The easy thing to say, right, is that it's just going to keep blowing up, and we have the movies and the TV shows and the Broadway shows and all that good stuff. I think the biggest thing is we have this thing coming out that I know you've seen, not that we have coming out, but Acappella, this Flow Voice channel, this web channel that's coming out. I'm very curious to see what happens with that, positively and negatively. I just think that the influx of more and more groups is going to be happening. We're seeing it on the college level and the high school level and now the middle school level. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's the younger, it's getting younger. Acappella's getting younger, and I think that is really cool. We're seeing middle school groups that are technically getting as good as high school and maybe some college groups. The only drawback I see to seeing more and more groups is that the talent pool is spreading. Like it's thinning out. And you see this a lot at ICCA shows or ICHSA shows, is that the top tier of groups aren't as top tier as they used to be, maybe. Whereas it's like at a campus, let's say a college campus where there were 5 groups and they were all very good. Now you have 10 groups and they're all kind of good, but not excellent because the top singers aren't all going to the top group like it used to be.
Yeah, no, I've heard that and I've seen that at some powerhouse schools that now the number of groups has doubled and the talent pool gets watered down a little bit.
Yeah, I'm surprised that we're not seeing more post-collegiate groups. I thought we would see more of that as stuff blew up, but I feel like that's not happening, or a group forms and they're gone in 6 months because the people don't stay.
Those years between 22 and 32, I mean, there's lots of life that happens. And I think that's just what it is that it's hard to sustain a group during those years financially, but just with life things happening, people having children, getting married, moving for careers, trying to sustain a career while also being a singer or performer or whatever. Music's tough. It's a tough career.
we're constantly seeing things on Facebook and Facebook groups saying, hey, I just moved to this area. Are there any groups I can join? Like, I just graduated and I moved here, and you don't see any responses from people. And it's surprising. It's like, there are groups that are looking for members because you see it all the time. You see audition information. I don't know what's going on with the disconnect. People don't want to take the time to look for the people, and the people don't want to take the time themselves to look for the groups. It's just like, I'll throw this up on Facebook, and if someone responds, great. If not,
social media laziness or whatever.
Right.
I don't know.
It's so frustrating. Old man ranter.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like a bunch of old guys complaining here. But so Voices Only submission is coming up in a couple months now.
It's open.
What's the date? And also, how can people get in touch with you about Voices Only, about Voices Only Productions? Yeah,
the submission date for Voices Only 2017 is June 15th, and it's all done digitally, and all the information is on my website at voicesonlyacappella.com with 2 P's and 2 L's, all one word, or on the Facebook page at Voices Only Acapella, facebook.com/voicesonlyacappella. You can email me at voicesonly@gmail.com or Corey@voicesonlyacappella.com, but the Gmail one's easier. And it's super simple. You upload music to our Dropbox. There's a link on the website. There's a small submission fee. There's a form you fill out that has all the questions that I need for everything. And that's it. And you're done. And then you just wait to hear. And so the plan for that is over the summer, we'll go through everything. Groups will not be notified of their selection ahead of time. The track list will be announced. I don't even remember the date. It's somewhere around September 1st, I think.
See, this is the real life of acapella producers. We don't know what's happening next week.
Yeah, right.
In Deke's interview, I asked him, what was the last time you were in the studio? What group were you with as a producer? And he's like, I don't remember, and please don't laugh. I have to go to my Wikipedia page.
So I've got it. The album will be released on September 4th. And that's when all the groups will find out. There's no other financial commitment. You don't have to buy anything. There's no pre-purchase requirement. It's super easy. As far as productions, it's voicesonlyproductions.com. Again, super easy. Voices, not voice. Some people forget the S sometimes. I'm based here in Michigan, but I travel everywhere. Like we talked about, I was in California a couple weeks ago. I was in Arizona last week. I'm going to be in Toronto next week. If you're in Canada and you're listening, or in Ontario and listening, I'm going to be at the Sing Toronto Festival the last weekend of May. I'm doing a production workshop. I'm doing something new, which I think is going to be really cool. Basically, it's an all-day workshop. It's an open recording session. I'm going to have a group in there, and I'm going to be recording them the way that I do it when I'm on location. And people can sit in and watch and see things from both the performer and the producer side. And there'll be time at the end of each hour to ask questions. Jump on the mic if there's time. You can listen to the MIDI that's playing and sing along.
That's cool. That sounds like a blast.
Yeah, I've never tried it before, and so I'm excited to try that method as opposed to just sitting in front of a group of people and telling them how to get the best recording. Because I feel like that's what I specialize in, is getting performance out of people. Because having listened to thousands and thousands of albums for Voices Only and Kara's and everything, I feel like I know what, as a Voices Only producer, I'm looking for. So I know how to get it. So that's what I try and teach people.
Awesome. Corey, thanks so much for being on the show and for being brutally honest about some of the stuff with Voices Only and what you hear from groups and how you feel about things. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Thanks for listening to the Recording Acappella podcast. If you're an action-taking, acapella-loving, savvy, do-it-yourself recording enthusiast, then you're in the right place. During this episode, you heard us talk about many ways to make great acapella recordings. So I've gone ahead and created an ebook called 10 Ways to Improve Your Acapella Recording for you to download for free. Just go to recordingacapella.com/podcast. These 10 ways have been the foundation of so many great sounding acapella recordings for decades, and I have personally used all of them to help my clients get better recordings. So go download this free tool for you to use to start improving your recordings today. And while you're at it, if you like the show, please head over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. See you in a couple weeks for the next episode of the Recording Acappella podcast.